In Whitechapel, life flowed in misery, and Jack the Ripper's victims were fireflies in the darkness for the killer's insane mind. Although almost a century and a half has passed since the Whitechapel crimes, the identity of the murderer continues to be shrouded in mystery. However, at the beginning of 2025, Karen Miller, a descendant of Catherine Eddowes, the fourth confirmed victim of the Ripper, launched a passionate appeal to reopen the investigation. She stated, quoting her words, "The name Jack the Ripper has become sensationalized. He has gone down in history as a famous character. It would mean a lot to me, to my family, to many people to finally have this crime solved." Her request is based on a potentially revolutionary element, the DNA analysis extracted from a shawl recovered at the crime scene. Tracing back the history of the investigations, some significant steps can be indicated. In January 2022, Christopher Stevens wrote an article in the Daily Mail. He reports that late on a Saturday night in December 1888, a woman knocked on the undertaker's door in Poplar, East London, shouting that she had something to tell Mr. Chivers. Thomas Chivers was the coroner's officer in the East End, known for his kindness and patience, as well as his long experience with the city's most brutal crimes. His job was to inspect every corpse in every unexplained death and provide evidence during the inquest. 2 days earlier, Mr. Chivers had examined the body of a 29-year-old prostitute known as Drunken Lizzie, noting a detail that had escaped the police. Her death was not caused by alcohol, but was murder. The death of Drunken Lizzie, whose real name was Rose Mylett, was linked to the serial killer haunting the East End, Jack the Ripper. The woman who knocked on Mr. Chivers' door did not go to the police because she herself was a prostitute and feared being arrested. The author of the Daily Mail article reports that this coroner was his great-great-grandfather, and his maternal grandmother remembered meeting him quite often as a child in the 1920s. It is believed that Mary Ann Polly Nichols, 42, was Jack the Ripper's first victim on August 31, 1888. And the author of the article wonders if his grandfather, who examined about 60,000 bodies for his work, had ever guessed the true identity of Jack the Ripper. Also in the Daily Mail, in the Australian version, journalist Gary Linnell reports that Frederick Deeming, an Australian murderer of English origin, could have been Jack the Ripper. In fact, Deeming had spent decades wandering between continents, preying on innocents and gullible people before being captured and hanged by Australian authorities in May 1892, following the discovery of his second wife's decomposing body. At that point, there were already strong suspicions that Deeming was also guilty of the murders attributed to Jack the Ripper. In 1892, even the New York Times reported on the front page the following quote, "The belief is gaining ground in official circles that the murders of which Deeming is the author are of the same type as those committed in Whitechapel, the district where Jack the Ripper operated." Deeming was excluded from the identities suspected of being the London killer because he was erroneously believed to be in prison, or in South Africa, at the time of the murders. But his involvement has been strengthened by several revelations in recent years, including a 2012 claim by forensic expert and former Scotland Yard detective, Robin Napper. Among the similarities that led to renewed interest in Deeming's potential role in the Whitechapel serial murders was the pathological hatred for prostitutes, a symptom of someone suffering from neurosyphilis. Deeming himself, in the days before the trial, told doctors that he had contracted syphilis from a prostitute and that he had gone looking for her on at least 4 occasions with the aim of revenge. One of Jack the Ripper's victims was Catherine Eddowes, 46, found in the early hours of September 30, 1888. A witness described seeing her at 1:35 a.m., shortly before her death, talking to a man with a blonde mustache. Regarding Deeming, a young seamstress identified him as a man with prominent light mustaches whom she knew as Lawson, who courted her in London at the time of the Ripper murders and who had shown an obsessive interest in the details of Eddowes' murder. Among the authors who formulated theories about Jack the Ripper's identity, there are 2 that have aroused interest. In a graphic novel titled From Hell, Alan Moore hypothesizes the identity of the serial killer as that of the Queen's doctor, Sir William Gull, who would have acted to avenge Prince Albert dying of syphilis. A theory probably borrowed from the circumstances that emerged in the 1970s, when Dr. Thomas Stoll published an article claiming to have come into possession of some documents regarding Dr. Gull's patients. One patient in particular had attracted his attention, referred to in the papers as Patient S, and according to Stoll, this could have been Jack the Ripper. Some speculations have also concerned Prince Albert himself, who could have been identified with the so-called Patient S, who suffered like him from syphilis. In fact, Patient S was described as the grandson of a Victorian matriarch and heir to great wealth. But this was just speculation, nothing certain was expressed, and it was Stoll himself who denied any correspondence between Patient S and the prince. While another appreciated author, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of the famous Sherlock Holmes, suggested the hypothesis that the killer could be a woman, the only one among all the fireflies who could go unnoticed in the nights of Whitechapel, and a woman was indeed suspected of the murders. It was Mary Piercy, executed for attacking her lover's mistress and killing the woman's child. Returning to the shawl found at the scene of one of the crimes, it could represent a hope for justice for the victims, but has already been at the center of a scientific controversy in 2014, and could contain the key to finally unraveling the mystery. Researcher Russell Edwards, based on DNA traces found on the fabric, pointed the finger at Aaron Kosminski, a Polish Jewish barber who immigrated to London's East End. A thesis not without criticism and doubts in the scientific community. The request for new investigations, however, clashes with the complexity of such an old case. In 2023, then Attorney General Michael Ellis had already rejected a similar request, arguing the insufficiency of new evidence. But technology advances, and with it the hope of new revelations. All that remains is to wait for developments on this new request for investigations.